A lot of times when people want to go into tech, they pay attention to the big names, right? They pay attention to the Oracles, the Salesforces, the HubSpots, the names that everybody knows. And those are hard. Those are difficult companies to get. Look for startups, look for small companies, look for companies that maybe aren't brand names. Because when you're thinking about pivoting into tech for the first time, chances are you're not going to land your dream company off the bat. Let me at least look for opportunities that, I have a better chance of getting. You're going to get much farther along.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Techniche Tips. I am your host, Joseph M. Smith, and like always, I have another one for you, and this one is a special one. Now, I know I always say that, but it really is, because every episode to me is special. I have someone very special for you here, Alexis Rodriguez. Did I roll my R right there?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes, you did.
Oh man, well, I'm so excited to have you on. We're gonna definitely talk about your story, but I gotta do the YouTube stuff, which is basically telling you guys to like, comment, and subscribe if you are watching this. If you don't know, there's also a podcast version of this as well. So go ahead, type in Techniche Tips and look it up in Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever podcasts are sold. So with that being said, I want to just dive right into this conversation because we have a guest with us that can tell us a lot about the world of pre-sales, because not only does she work in pre-sales or has worked in pre-sales as a sales engineer, but she also manages a group now. She's a manager of sales engineers. And so with that being said, I don't want to steal her thunder any longer. I'm going to pass over to Alexis. Let the people know what is it that you do and also what you're looking to do in the future. I think they'll be very excited to find that out.
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, I'm Alexis. I currently am a manager of solutions engineers at HubSpot. So I spent about 4 years up until this past April being a solutions engineer at HubSpot myself. And I really found in the last year or so that what got me excited, what got me out of bed, what I became passionate about was really helping other SEs hone their skills and help them figure out what their career paths are, helping them, coaching them, mentoring them, things of that nature. And through that experience, I realized that management was a calling for me, and that was my path and my next step. I think it's, something to be said when you get more excited about helping others and less excited about closing deals. That's kind of where I was. And so I've been a manager now for 6 months. So I'm still pretty new, pretty fresh, still learning the ropes. But one thing that I am, that I know for the future, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone 10 years from now. But I know that whatever I will be doing, it will be helping others in some capacity, whether it's, through management, whether it's in some other kind of role where I'm able to really help people, figure out what are their superpowers and how do they use them to, attack whatever it is that they're working on, whether it's their job, whether it's stuff in their personal lives. In addition to HubSpot, and I know one of the things that brought us here today is outside of my 9 to 5, I'm also teaching people how to break into technical pre-sales through a company called Learnfull that was started by my good friend Nigel. So pre-sales is kind of my life right now, whether I'm managing my 9 to 5 or I'm working with people in the evenings who are working in various industries looking to break into tech. I'm all about it.
Wow. So you have a very nurturing part of who you are, which I could tell. Like you're like, hey, I want to help people. I want to get them where they want to go. Where did that come from? Is that something that's always been a part of who you are?
That's a really great question. Well, I am a water sign. So I think maybe there's something there. Yeah, I'm the oldest. I'm a big sister. I think I am very blessed. My parents are both, they both have very big hearts. And so my ethnic background for context is I'm Puerto Rican and Italian. And my parents both grew up in New Jersey, so you can take that for whatever you want.
I live in Central Jersey now, so
There you go. They're both from Hoboken, New Jersey.
all right.
So they grew up. They both grew up very poor. They both grew up, with a lot of hardships. And one thing that I've always seen them do is give back. My mom was a special education
Mm.
teacher for over 30 years. She just retired about 2 years ago. And my dad, he served in the military for 21 years. And now, even, in his early 60s, he volunteers with an organization called Rubicon, which is a nationwide deployment. They are disaster relief deployment. So
Wow.
anytime there's like hurricanes or anything like that, in like Florida, he goes to Puerto Rico a lot, all those places. So my parents have always just been about helping other people through humility. And I think just seeing that growing up, it's always just become a part of who I am. And I always root for the underdog. My mom is an athlete. She's actually a Hall of Fame basketball player at 5'6".
What? Mhm.
Surprisingly, yeah, for her college. And
Oh
so,
my.
yeah, I think just kind of growing up with sports and the giving back, you just always are rooting for the underdog. You're always just wanting to help. And so, yeah, I guess that's the root of where that comes from.
No, that's great roots to come from. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, wow, you go to New Jersey and then traveling to help people overseas that are in disaster relief and Hall of Fame parents in the NCAA. Like
Yeah.
that's super cool. A lot of people can't say that. So kudos to you. That's actually really cool to see. And so if I'm trying to think of the mind of wow, growing up in Hoboken, were you always a person that was interested in technology, or did technology come later? Like, what does that story look like?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I actually grew up in Delaware, believe it or not.
Oh,
I was born
nice.
and raised in Delaware, and the reason being, my dad, when he was married my mom, that's where he was stationed. So,
In
uh,
Dover?
Dover, yep, exactly. Yeah, he
That's
was
where
in
my
there.
sister's that's where my sister is. She's in the Air Force.
Oh yeah, Air Force. Yep.
Yep.
So interestingly, I don't know if you've been, but there's not a lot going on. It's a very rural, suburban kind of area. There's only 3 counties in the whole state. But I did have kind of a dichotomous upbringing since my family was from Hoboken. My mom's very close to her family, so I was going up there quite a bit. So
Mm,
I did kind of get to see two sides of the coin as a young child, and going to visit my Puerto Rican side, I still got a lot of that culture. Tech was never something that really spoke to me growing up at all. My dad was kind of a tech nerd. He definitely had his computer room. He was like really into video games. He actually now, in his retirement from the military, he now works kind of in an IT role. So he's always been kind of into that. But I was always more of a creative. My sister and I both got those genes from our dad. He's a very eclectic individual. But I knew from an early age that I actually wanted to major in writing whenever I went to college. And so I kind of had that thought in my head. So when I did get to college, it wasn't even a second thought. Like I didn't even think about what am I going to do with this? Like I just was like, I had this vision. I knew I wanted to pursue writing. And so I actually was a creative writing major in college, and I focused a lot on poetry. I actually used to perform spoken word when I was in school, the whole nine. Yeah, yeah, a lot of finger snaps. And so it really wasn't honestly until I got into the working world. So after college, I kind of had that, come to Jesus moment senior year where I was like, okay, I need a job. All my friends were getting jobs, especially those in the financial industry, because they get jobs early.
yeah.
And I was like, what do I want to do? And so, I had this idea since I didn't want to be a starving artist. I wanted to make money. I was like, maybe I should go into publishing, right? Like that seems to be the natural progression.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, I don't know if are familiar with Pearson. They make like all the textbooks.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So one of their HR reps happened to come to my campus one day, and the English major department like put it together. I literally went to that session, resume in hand, and I was like, "I'm Alexis. Here's my resume." So I ended up working for Pearson as an editorial assistant, and quickly got advice from my manager that I should spend time in sales if I wanted to move up in that industry. Because
Really?
that just, believe it or not, that's the nature of academic publishing, is everybody who works their way up spends time in sales. So
Oh,
yeah, it's definitely a different world. Publishing, and especially academic publishing, is I never would have thought I would have worked in it, and I worked in that industry for about 5 years. But yeah, I that was one of the best pieces of advice I got, because I went into sales. I actually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina at that time as a field sales rep. And it was kind of towards the end of my tenure in sales where I started to think about tech, or like midway, because I spent about 3.5 years, and I started seeing other people that were moving into tech, or friends of mine from college who were in tech. And this was about 2016. And it was hard to ignore the amount of money they were making. And, I was like,
Mhm.
okay, there's something here. And so because I didn't have a background or any experience in tech, I actually at the time started doing a master's program part-time online in digital media design, just to kind of get my feet wet in the academic space. Because when you looked at my resume, I mostly was like, writing, publishing. So I wanted to diversify myself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's then I started kind of thinking about tech, and started, making those plans.
Hey, family, I'm back again. You talked about Course Careers Technology Sales course and what it did to change my life. Wait, there's more. Not only is it technology sales information technology courses as well, now there's human resources, customer success, UI, UX, and did I even mention that there also is software development as well? Front end, back end, and DevOps? Listen, this is something that you definitely want to take advantage of. So go ahead, click that link. Don't forget there's a discount from me if you click that link, and I hope to see you on the other side. So basically, the basic needs of survival moved you from a creative space into a technical space, and I totally get it. I'm a musician by heart. I went to undergrad for my bachelor's in sacred music.
Oh, that's so
Whatever.
cool.
Yeah, so I get it. I get it. You had that creative drive, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the needs to take care of everything else, and so there's this tug of war between these two worlds, the creative and the logical brain is like, hey, you got to get it together.
Right.
How are you able to marry the two? Because
Mhm.
someone could look at a sales engineer position and
Mhm.
say that's a very technical role. I don't see much creativity in there.
Mm.
But you and I both know that you could be very creative
Oh, yeah.
as a sales engineer. Can you explain how you're able to marry the two?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Well, my first foray into pre-sales was actually at kind of a late stage tech startup. It was a blessing from God, 100%. I had a former sales manager around the time that I was looking to break into tech, who had gone to this company. It was in the education space, so they were developing a technology for math and science courses. But it was a tech company. So she was like, hey, they have the solutions architect role. Like, why don't you come over? And so I went over as a solutions architect. But I mean, if you've ever worked at a startup, or if you're familiar with startups, you know that typically the role you get hired for is one of the many things that you end up doing. So I
Yeah.
think that was my first introduction to marrying creativity with a technical role, because it afforded that, right? Because when you're in this like hustle, environment where it's a new company, there were less than, I think we only had like maybe 3 or 4 solutions architects in the country. That's actually what moved me to Chicago, because I was working with Midwest sales reps. And so, you had to be creative. We were a brand new technology. That was something that wasn't really being done at that time, because it was adaptive software, and it was textbook agnostic, which, we it's been a few years, but at that point, this was like what, 2017, 2018. We were still kind of in this phase where like some professors were like really progressive, like we don't need a textbook, but then you still have people who were like, textbooks are life, like we need all that. So it was really interesting time. So at first, the creative problem solving of like, how do we talk about this? And one of my superpowers has always been connecting with people and being able to pretty much have a conversation with anybody. And so I started to learn how to be creative in that aspect with like, how do I, work with this technology? How do I get this message across? How do I leverage my storytelling, skills? And so that's I think one of the most underrated parts about being a solutions engineer or solutions architect that people don't realize. Storytelling is
Oh,
so important. So important. So moving to HubSpot, in a more established department where, I was more in my role, The creativity has really come from the storytelling and problem solving. Like I'm a crossword junkie. I love doing crosswords. I love puzzles. I love doing those things. And I feel like that's what solutions engineering is, right? I kind of semi joke that it's almost like getting a mini MBA because you're talking to companies every day that are in completely different industries, and you need to understand in a very short amount of time what their business is about, how they operate their business, and how your software is going to fit their business. And then you get to kind of take that away and start playing around with things like, okay, how is this going to work for them? So I think that's it, and it definitely, depending on the software you work with, like HubSpot is, I would say, where in the past 4 years that I've been at the company, the software has grown exponentially. But when you're kind of a newer-ish software and you can't quite do all of the things, it definitely requires you to be creative and like, all right, how do we do workarounds here? How can we do this? So yeah.
Yeah, and I see it all the time in demos, right? I'm an SDR, and I've been doing this for almost a year now, and I had the opportunity to see that once the 3 of us get together, the SDR, the AE, and then the subject matter expert in my company, but the sales engineer,
Mhm.
it's a beautiful work, at that point, I'm writing notes down, I'm trying to keep the conversation, documented, and, we use Gong and other things like that, which is great, but when you see the AE come in and kinda say, "Hey, I have the sales engineer here," the sales engineer, the really good ones, are able to take the client through a journey of how their potential client can walk through the software and use it and utilize it, or even how they could utilize it in the back office and be able to be like, wow, I could see us doing this.
Yep.
And so that definitely aligns with poetry because I think it's poetic in motion. I think it's
Yeah,
poetry in motion if you want to think about it that way. And so
totally.
that's really cool that you're able to kind of just put that in a nice, beautiful capsule so that people could see like, hey, you don't have to necessarily give up your creativity when you're getting into tech. You
Totally.
could just leverage it in a different way.
Yep.
And the great storytellers that encountered on this journey have either landed their job because of their storytelling, have
Mhm.
excelled in their job because of their storytelling, and have really utilized that skill to be a powerful tool for them. So if y'all heard it again, this is not the first time you heard storytelling as a gift, right? So
Yes.
definitely tap into it if you have that. And that makes me think of, because I know sometimes creative people, we could tend to get bored quickly.
Mm.
We could tend to be like, ah. And so I wanted to ask you, did you have like a I'm kind of bored moment, or did you kind of like say, you know what, I just want to dive deeper into this, get deeper into this,
Mm.
did you have that moment?
That's a good question. Ooh, I haven't been asked that. You know, one thing that I will say, so one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what do I attribute my success to? I was a top performer solutions engineer 2 years in a row. I went to President's Club this past year. And so people ask me that a lot, right? And thank you. And one of the things that I tell people is that, I categorize, I actually was talking about this last night in my Learnfull course. I categorize it into two buckets: self-awareness and resourcefulness. And I think in terms of resourcefulness, and I know this is kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but I'll get to the point. But when I think about resourcefulness, for me, what I realized pretty early on was, as a solutions engineer, what I was really good at and what I wasn't good at. And what I was really good at was connecting with people, establishing relationships with my sales reps so that we gelled really well together, identifying my sales reps' weaknesses, pretty early on. So that way, when you're on a call, you can chime in and pick up the slack and you just know how to work that dynamic. And also storytelling, right? Where I wasn't strong was the technical side. And I'll be honest, I was never the most technical SE. Did I learn enough to be dangerous on calls and to handle my own? Absolutely. But when I started to try and like deepen my knowledge in some of those areas, I would get bored. And I think part of that was because I just am not the person that wants to code, that wants to really dive into SQL servers and like all the ins and outs and intricacies of how databases connect to each other and things like that. So what I would tell people, right, is that I learned how to be okay with that. and I learned who my resources were on my team in my department that I could lean on when, like, hey, I have this deal. It's a little bit out of my technical purview. Can we talk through it? And I would learn through those experiences. But I think, like, for me, I knew that I'm definitely one of those people. I cannot force it. If it's boring to me, I can't force it. I learned that in college the hard way when I tried to double major in econ, and that didn't work out. So, yeah, I have gotten, like, when it comes to certain aspects of the role, like, I would get bored. And what I recognize is that it was okay. I don't need to be all of these things. I need to figure out what it is that I'm really good at, and I nurtured that. And so for me, that eventually evolved into helping other people, which brought me farther away from the technical aspect, right? And now it's more of the people aspect. So yeah, I mean, you do get bored. And I think my advice for that is, understanding what it is that is boring to you and what other aspects of the role excite you. You know what I mean? And how do you balance that? How do you nurture what excites you? And how do you take what's boring and turn it into an opportunity? So for me, like, even though the technical aspect and diving into that and learning wasn't my jam, I still would find the right people and still spend the time necessary to do my job well, but I wasn't beating myself up over it because I wasn't overextending myself, forcing myself to, be in this box.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. I think for me, finding the game within the game, because being an SDR, you have to hunt.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like the fact of getting in this conversations and being creative. Of course, trying to stay close to, what it is, the value props and things of that nature. But sometimes I love the ability to almost be an actor on a stage.
Yeah.
So I might get on a call and I'll be like, hey, I'm calling from da 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 da. How are you doing today? Are you feeling great? I'm feeling good. Are you feeling good? And they're like, that kind of throws them off a little bit. And then they say, you know what? And then they kind of get into the conversation. Or it might be something where it's like, hey, listen, I I lost half my face to Ramsey Hunt syndrome. So if you can't hear me properly, I'm sorry. Let's try to do this together.
Right.
And just being transparent and
Yeah.
having real conversations and being creative with the way I approach things has been my outlet for creativity. Because I'm like, oh, this is fun. I could try it this way, or I could try it this way. And it's allowed me to get some good success in my first 11 months doing this job. So I hear what you're saying. And another thing you said there, I love what you said. You get these places where you are dangerous. I like that. I like how you said that. But one specific thing you said that I really liked is that you looked at your strengths and you
Mhm.
say, okay, let me just make sure I solidify these. I can work on these and make sure I'm good here. And then the other places, yeah, it's gonna happen, right? I'm gonna get to it, but at least I know where I'm strong. And I
Mhm.
think that if we come in that mindset, people that are on the fringe, because a lot of people that are watching are either on the fringe of where do I go in tech? What
Right.
do I do? And
Yeah.
they're trying to figure out through these interviews, and then kind of giving that way to look at it says, you know what, I actually am good at numbers. So maybe I want to do this, or I'm good at design. Maybe I want to get into Q, doing design or doing what was it? Can't even talk right now. UI.
Yeah, UI. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and so different things that people can actually do, and that's why I love to have these conversations. And so before I get to Learnfull, I want to talk about that transition that you had,
Mhm.
because you went from being a sales engineer to now a manager of
Mm.
sales engineers. That's a big jump for people, you know, who don't know.
It is. It is. Yeah, it is a big jump. It's funny, the VP of my department told me when I was going for this role, she was like, it's the toughest transition going from a top performing individual contributor to a manager. And it is. And I tell people, all the time, no matter, and you can say this about most things in life, no matter how much you think you're prepared for something mentally, it's it's a completely different ball game when you're in it. It's completely different. So for me, I had worked with my previous manager for about a year. Like, we knew I wanted to be a manager. He was a phenomenal mentor. He really helped me come into my own. He was, I would say, the first person to truly see my leadership potential and nurture that in me. And so, we went into this very prepared, and I went into the interview. I obviously, got the job, but being in it, there's so much that you don't realize goes into being a manager. And it's been an interesting roller coaster for sure. what I have been telling, I actually led a session recently internally at HubSpot, um, on going from IC to manager, for people who are interested in that path. And one of the things that I struggled with is, and I still struggle with, is organization. You don't necessarily think about it, but when you're a solutions engineer, or in your case, an SDR or a sales rep, like your calendar is pretty much spoken for. Like, you know what you have to do. You have the deals, you have the leads, you have the opportunities. You're playing calendar Tetris. You know when you got to meet your quota. For SEs, like, I know what I got to do for my deals. But when you're a manager, the white space you get on your calendars, you're like, all right, what do I do? Like, I know I have this list of things that I need to do, but like, how do we prioritize this? How do we think through this? And so that's been an interesting shift for me in trying to figure that out. Another thing I will say that I've been dealing with recently is, how do you show up for your team when you're going through personal things? And
Mm.
that has been, I will say, a really tough lesson, because, I've just been going through a challenging time in my life the last few months, and it personally. And so, immediately I'm like, when I was an individual contributor, it was fine. If I needed to shut off, we work in a remote world. It's fine. I work my deal, I go away. But now I'm responsible for 7 people. And, on top of that, I'm responsible for their growth, for their careers, like all these things. Like, even just last week, I actually just moved from Chicago to Charlotte, North Carolina, and literally a week ago. And I got really sick when I got here. I only took 2 days off because last week was the only week that we had to do our performance reviews. And so I'm sick. I just moved. I don't have my furniture yet, all these things. And then I had to do 7 performance reviews as a first time manager with my entire team within 2 days. And that was a lot. And it's, and even like being on your A game, that could be a lot, but throw in all those other variables, throw in going through a difficult time in your life. And
Yeah.
it's been a challenge, I will say, but I feel very fortunate and blessed to work at a company in a department that is very understanding of us as humans, not worker bees, which is nice.
Hey, do you feel stuck? Do you feel like you're just at the same place in your career and you don't really see a way out? This is a great time for you to take it to the next level. Level Careers is a course that I've been talking about for some time. From account executive and even sales engineering, there are courses that can help you propel from where you are now to where you want to go. Check out the link below. Use my promo code Joseph10 and check out the free courses, whether that's the SOC analyst course, the account executive course, or the sales engineer course. Take your career to the next level. Yeah, and I totally agree with you there. Like, when you work for a place, I would honestly say an industry, really,
Mhm.
for the most part, where there is a value on you being a human being first, it feels different. I
It,
mean, I think about it the other day, and this is when I was sick. Everybody kind of knows about it now, but when I had the Ramsey Hunt syndrome, I literally was diagnosed with it with Bell's palsy before I was diagnosed with Ramsey Hunt syndrome, and then I try to push through it. I got a couple of deals, books, demos that not demos really, but overviews that I booked and stuff like that. But like 2 days later, I had like a huge headache, and I'm like, okay, I need to go to the ER. There was no like, you sure you want to go right now? There's no question about it. Like they're like, please get off the phone here. Go, close your
yeah,
laptop, take
God.
care of yourself. Be kind to yourself is a phrase that my manager loves to say. And I think that that's another value point about basically working in this industry is that you are valued as a human being first. And I just wanted to echo that sentiment because it's so true.
Yeah, it really is.
So yeah, yeah. And so listener, watcher, whoever, if you're on the podcast listening in, if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you have those issues or those struggles where you kind of have to basically kind of figure out, okay, can I tell my employer that I need some time off or face the consequences? Just know that there's an industry that would actually look at you as a human being first and would actually say, hey, take care of yourself. We'll
Yeah,
be we'll be here when you come back. We'll be here when
exactly.
you come.
And I think great advice that was given to me when I was going through, and has I've been going through all this too, is if you're not showing up, if you can't come to work, even though we're in the virtual world 100%, your team's going to understand. Like you, and I always tell people this too. I tell people on my team all the time, we're not saving lives. We're selling software. You gotta keep the context in your mind. Like we're not
Yeah.
brain surgery here. So it's okay if you miss a day, if you miss a deal, if you miss whatever. And so that was really helpful for me to keep in mind. And also, one of my manager colleagues told me, like, because she had gone through similar situation when she was a new manager, and she's like, just be transparent. And that helped a lot, is just being open and honest. Like, hey, I'm going through something right now, letting my manager, my director know, like, this is what's going on. Like, and that is being vulnerable. Is I'm the biggest fan of vulnerability. And that goes so far, and really is such a huge part of keeping yourself healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that as well. And I wanted just to touch on this real quickly because I know that this is something that people that are, again, they're on the fringe. They're looking in. They're like, I think so, maybe not. What is the day in the life of a sales engineer? And then you can even elaborate to say, what's the day in the life of a manager such as yourself?
God, good question. So they definitely look a little different. So a day in the life of a solutions engineer, and I will say this is a caveat, right? Because it's going to look a little different at any company you work for. I would say there are some fundamental similarities in pre-sales, regardless of the company, but the way companies handle pre-sales is a little bit different. And the reason why I say that, so one of the unique things that I have found about HubSpot solutions engineering is that we actually don't run full demos at HubSpot as SEs. So our AEs, our sales reps, they run their full demos. And but where we come in, and what I like to call our brand, if you will, is we are technical and strategic deal partners. So a day in the life, you have your pipeline as a solutions engineer, you have the deals that we have sales reps who are requesting support. Usually that happens right after they have their discovery call with the prospect, because they've unearthed maybe a complicated business use case, some technical aspects that they know they're going to need help with, whatever the case may be. And so solutions engineering gets wrapped in. So on any given day, likely a solutions engineer is running internal deal prep review calls with their rep. They got assigned a deal, they meet with the rep, maybe other people that are involved in the deal process, and just get a lay of the land. What do we know? What do we need to still find out, and just really get a good sense of the prospect and what their use cases and pain points are, and then discussing those next steps, right? And there's a lot of strategy in that as a solutions engineer, a lot of asking the right questions, and asking questions is an art form. I will say that. And so there's that part. And then you have your prospect facing calls, right? So on any given day, I could have anywhere from like 3 to, maybe on a busy day, 6 meetings. And those could be a mix of internal deal reviews, prospect facing calls, which those calls could either be demos where we're supporting the rep, or maybe we're running a part of it, or we're really just there to help add additional value, tell that story. Or it could be a technical call where we're discussing integrations, discussing a very technical use cases, talking to IT. And then you also have your internal meetings. So something at HubSpot that we do in our organization and pre-sales is we have projects. So we call them enterprise value projects. So typically a solutions engineer, as part of their promotion path and things that they work on, they're working on projects. So for example, one thing that I worked on with a couple other people last year was we helped develop resources, like quick, easy resources for sales reps, to give them kind of the down low on integrations, like the top 3 things they need to know when they're going into a discovery call, for example. So could be creating enablement resources. We actually have people right now in our organization who are working on making our security enablement better internally. We have people working on like forecasting projects, because we do have some kind of like target attainment. And so they're working
Yeah.
on how do we forecast better. So there's all different types of really cool things that, which is what I love about HubSpot, is that whatever your interests are as an SE, you get an opportunity to work outside of deals on those types of things. And so yeah, so any given day, you have a mix of calls. They could be internal project based stuff, team meetings, things like that. And then, of course, in the time when you're not in meetings, you're working on your deal prep, you're working on your deal follow ups, you're working on, maybe stuff for your project. So it keeps you busy. Now, as a
Wow.
manager, completely different. Completely different. As a manager, I mean, every week is different. Every day is different. A lot of my days are spent looking at data, which is new to me. Looking at data, looking to see, where some of my SEs might need help, might need coaching. I also do call reviews. So we record all of our sales calls. So I actually just started doing that this week with my team, where I'm listening to some of their calls that they picked for me to get feedback. I'm meeting with the other managers that I work in the same segment with. So I'm a manager in our mid-market segment. So we meet weekly and we talk about things like trends, try and solve problems, sales team alignments. That's one of the things we're going through right now. How do we align sales teams better? How do we better enable our solutions engineers? What's going on with our culture? What are things that we can do to improve the culture? It's just a constant barrage
Wow.
of things that are coming at you every week of what can we make better as managers for our people, whether it's culture related, whether it's, doing their job, whether it's, alignment, making sure that pre-sales is all aligned because we've grown. When I first started, we had 15 SEs in 2019 for North America. Now we
Oh,
have 6 SE teams, 2 SA teams. It can be, as you can imagine, there's definitely that need for cohesion and alignment as you scale. And so that's
yeah.
a lot of what we're working on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a lot though, like, further of all, I know that from my vantage point, especially in my organization, sales engineers, they get a lot, right? So, but to hear what a engineer manager has to do, it really does make me have a greater appreciation, you know? So Caroline, if you're out there, I appreciate you, manager. So, so yeah, no, no, she's the best. But yeah, no, it makes me definitely appreciate all that you do, and there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Speaking about learning, let's talk about Learnfull.
Yeah.
Uh, so Learnfull is a special thing to me, and the reason why I say that is because I've seen other groups and organizations, and one thing I like to kind of put out there is, in my understanding, or what I believe, is that there are some prerequisites to becoming a sales engineer,
Mhm.
and yes, there's some people that have been able to get the role uh, without having some of those prerequisites, but it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And it really is one of those things where when somebody could really kind of get in there, they really are in a good spot.
Mhm.
But it's not an easy place to become. I mean, SDR, entry level position, BDR, you're cool. Yeah, yeah, you get there a little bit easier. But sales engineer, woo, that's something else. And so I love something that like Learnful because of the accountability that it provides,
Mhm.
the community that you have, the fact that it is a 6-week program at the time that you're in whatever cohort you are in, and you're going through that together. And then once you leave the program, you have not left the community. I
Right.
actually had a graduate that I spoke to offline, and he was like, "Yeah, like I was contemplating how I'm going to go forward, being strategic, because that's what I learned to do." And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, my mentor comes and said, "Wait, what you doing? Have you applied to jobs? Let's go." And he's like, I, sir," and, and
Yeah.
so, but that's really cool. Can you talk about how you were able to stumble into Learnful and how you became a part of that organization?
Yeah, yeah, I love that question. So it was very divine timing, serendipitous. You can tell I'm a spiritual person, so I believe in all of that. And for me, I had about a year or so ago, I was, you know, and I still kind of am in this place in my life where I'm like, how do I give back beyond my 9
Mhm.
to 5, right? Because it's one thing to, feel fulfilled giving back to people at work, but at the end of the day, it's work. It's, you're making money for a company. And so, and I think it's like I talked about my parents, I think it's so important for us to give back to other people in whatever capacity that looks like. And so I was actually going through this kind of soul searching journey of how can I give back? Like, what do I have to give back? Right. And it just so happened that Nigel, who is the founder of Learnfull and a very dear friend of mine, so we actually worked on the same team at HubSpot at the time, and we had become very good friends, and we were fast friends. And when he started coming up with the idea for Learnfull, he came to me and he was like, tell me about it, and I was super excited. And then he was like, I'd love for you to be a part of it. Like, I'd love for you to be an instructor. And when he started at HubSpot, I was about, I think, a little over 2 years into my tenure. So I had helped him a lot when he was in USC, onboarding and all of that. And so he was like, you're really good at this. Like, you have a gift to teach and to help other people like learn this role. And so it was just very like, I like almost took a step back and kind of teared up. And I was like, oh my gosh, what timing? Because I've literally been thinking about how can I give back. And so that was the impetus of me joining. He, put it together. I was like, I'm in, let's do this. I helped create content for the sessions that I teach. So I teach 4 content-based sessions. And then I also run we have like tech roundtable discussions every Thursday. So I run one of those. And then we also towards the end have like our role plays and things like that I help out with. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Hey, I didn't forget about you. You're a person that needs to be in a place where you are working close with someone else, a mentor, a friend, someone that could take you to the deeper and more intricate parts about being a sales engineer, but you don't know where to go. Learnfull is a program that allows you to work with people that are high-ranking sales engineers, solution architects, solutions advisors, and they're able to not only mentor you, but teach you the ways to become a sales engineer that can be impactful for you. If you think that Learnfull is for you, go ahead and click on the link below for more information. You can use my promo code Joseph150 to be able to save. Go ahead and click the link below. And now back to our show. Nice. And so somebody that's listening to that might be wondering, like, man, that sounds cool. I get to hang out with Alexis and Nigel and all these different people. I want in.
Yeah.
Let me remind you, if I haven't said it before, it is a selective process. And so I think I have an idea of the type of person that you're looking for in Learnfull.
Yeah.
Who would you say is that type of person that you're saying, hey, if you have X, Y, and Z, maybe let's make it simple. Let's say, what are the 3 characteristics of a standout student, if you want to call them a student or pupil, that goes through the Learnfull program and succeeds?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if I had to break it down into 3 characteristics, it would be growth mindset. I think that that's so vital. I mean, honestly, in anything in life, right? Because especially when
Yeah.
you're transitioning into something completely new, if you don't have a growth mindset, you're not going to be successful. I think that's just the bottom line. So growth mindset, I would say self-awareness, which again, I think self-awareness is one of those key pieces where, you know, and I tell this to everybody that comes through our cohorts, being self-aware of who you are and what your superpowers are is going to be what helps get you into this role. Because
Mm,
you mentioned this earlier, right? Like when you think about what are you good at and how does that fit? Like where does that fit in the tech space? What role does that fit in? That inevitably requires you to be self-aware of what those things even are to begin with, right? And being
yeah.
really honest with yourself of like, what am I good at? And not only that, but owning it, right? Because so often people get scared, they become afraid of like, oh, I've never done this before. I can't be good at this. But if you are honest with yourself and you're like, well, I'm really good at this, and that's something that they're looking for, well, why not? And so I
Yeah.
think that self-awareness and growth mindset are so critical. And then I think the last thing is discipline. I think,
Mm,
as with anything, when we live in a society where we expect fast results, we expect immediacy, we expect instant gratification. And we have long forgotten the discipline that goes into mastering. If you talk to anybody who's the best at whatever it is that they're the best at,
Yeah.
I guarantee you they will tell you they've spent hours and hours and hours dedicated and disciplined to their craft. And I'm not saying, you have to spend every single waking moment, dedicated to being a solutions engineer, going to pre-sales, but it does take a
Yeah.
level of discipline. It's 6 weeks, it's Monday through Friday, every evening, you're meeting with a mentor. There's a lot of things that you could be doing with that time. We go from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. Like that's late. There's a lot of things that, other people could be doing out with their friends, whatever. So it takes discipline and dedication to really, hone to reach your goals.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Growth mindset, self awareness, and discipline. I mean, you have to have discipline in order to achieve anything. And I think for those that I've known of who had been able to do all those different things, they had a strong why. Like, I know for myself, when I was trying to get into becoming an SDR after kind of working my way in solar sales a little bit, I was like, man, I need to make a change. I have a baby, we have another baby due. Like it's just a lot of different changes are happening. I need to be intensely focused on the task at hand, and that is what kind of gave me the tenacity to be like, okay, boom, I'm landing this here. And so that tenacity needs to be for you. If you are one of the privileged few to get into Learnfull, because like I remind you, it's almost like 120 members of these. I think about 120, I think, per year that you guys accept in
Mhm.
regards to students. That's not a lot of people, right? So if you are if you're part of the privileged few to get into that cohort, you definitely want to be able to take this by the horns and really run with it, and
Yeah.
really kind of give your all, because it's one of those things. It's a privilege, it's an opportunity. You're building connections and you're networking with people that are not going to just, okay, great, you got the certificate, you're done with the program, boom. No, these are people that are going to really rock with you and ride with you for a while. Um, and so when I saw that, I'm like, man, this is something that is very unique.
Yeah.
The reason why there's this buy-in, I call it a buy-in, is because you need to have skin in the game,
Yeah.
right? You need to invest in yourself, and so that's the reason why there is this buy-in. I'll just call it a buy-in that they have that's attached to it. And so definitely check it out. I don't want to scare you from Learnful because it's such a good thing, but
It
just
is.
know that this is not for the faint of heart. They're looking for soldiers. They're looking for people that can really kind of say this is what they've done the research a little bit, they understand preset a little bit, and they're ready to get into this because it could be a life altering decision. And with that being said, Alexis, thank you so much. I really wanted to I love the fact that we're able to talk about so much different things in regards to the creativity that could be found in tech, and in regards to your trajectory, your career trajectory, and and how a lot of people can follow that path. Now, in regards to the person that has a question right now that says, "Okay, great, I know that I want to do Learnful. I think that's a path for me." You mentioned those prerequisites for a person that would be a great candidate for this program. What what if I wanted to kind of do it the old fashioned way? How could I become a sales engineer the old fashioned way? What would you say to them?
The old-fashioned way. Ooh, that's a good one. Ooh. I would say the first step is to become intimately familiar with the role. I think there's a lot of content out there these days. There's a lot of blogs, there are a lot of videos. I would say be hungry and consume as much content as possible to really understand the role. Because I think there for a couple of different reasons. One, obviously if you're going to go into interviews and you're going to search for companies, you're going to want to understand what it is, that you're going for. But I think too, as well, the more you become familiar with a role, the more you start to understand, one, is it the right role for me? Right? Because I think a lot of times, especially if you've never worked in tech, there's so many roles in the tech space that you can't find in other industries. And so a lot of times I feel like it's difficult just translating. What do these things mean? What does this how how do I go about, going into this type of role? Or what are even the responsibilities? So I would say research it, really get intimately familiar. And as you're starting to get familiar with the role and what makes a strong solutions engineer, and like I said, you're going to find a lot of videos out there, people talking about this, start to actually write down your superpowers, right? I can't stress this enough. Like start to write down and reflect on what are you really, really good at and how does that align with your role, with the solutions engineer role, right? And so I would say that's the first step. And then, as you start to look at companies, that's where, we had a recruiter come join us in our tech roundtable last week at Learnfull, and he dropped some knowledge. And I'll drop a little bit of wisdom that he was talking about that I was like, that's such a good point. A lot of times when people want to go into tech, they pay attention to the big names, right? They pay attention to the Oracles, the Salesforces, the HubSpots, the names that everybody knows. And those, I mean, those are hard. Those are difficult companies to get roles at, especially right now in the economy that we're in the tech landscape that we're in 2023. So look for startups, look for small companies, look for companies that maybe aren't brand names, because when you're thinking about pivoting into tech for the first time, chances are you're not going to land your dream company off the bat. Chances are you're not even going to land your dream role off the bat. So I think, if you go in with that mindset of, okay, let me at least look for opportunities that, I have a better chance of getting, you're going to get much farther along. And then also keep in mind that, and this is one of the things that he said, and we both talked about a little bit, keep in mind that even if it doesn't work out, right off the bat, a lot of times recruiters, when you're going for roles, they will be able to direct you if they feel like, for example, you're not the right fit, for this particular role. They might be able to redirect you into another role at the company. They're like, hey, why don't you think about this? I actually, speaking of SDRs, I had one of my best friends, she had a former colleague who spent time in sales for years, in event sales, got laid off during the pandemic, wanted to work at HubSpot. And I was honest with him. I was like, look, this is your first time in software sales. Chances are they're going to start you at the bottom of the barrel. And I was like, if you're okay with that, you're going to be taking a pay cut, but you will have that ability to move up and you will be able to get your foot in the door, which is the most important piece. Then I would say it's for you. And that's exactly what ended up happening. He ended up getting a BDR role, which is, SDR. He ended up getting that role, and he now is a sales rep, has moved up the ranks within, I think, less than 2.5 years. So I say that to you as well. If you're getting rejection after rejection, don't be afraid. Like when recruiters are telling you, hey, you're not a great fit, be like, hey, you've seen my resume. You've seen, what my skill sets are. Are there other opportunities at your company you think I could be better suited for at this time? Yeah. So I would say those are some of the important things, is just do your research, work on skills, match up your superpowers, and have that growth mindset, and don't give up.
Drop the mic.
Yeah.
This is the proverbial mic right here. Chopped. That was really good, Alexa, especially that last part. Like, I think I don't know if I heard that before. I'm trying to think if I interviewed recruiters and all sorts of people. I don't think I heard anybody say, "Hey, you see my resume? What other positions might be a good fit that you may know of?" I think that's a gem. Definitely keep that relationship with recruiters, keep that flowing, because you never know. That is so good. Alexis, I love this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here at Techniche Tips. It was a blast.
Thank you.
I know a few sales engineers that are trying to get into that role that will definitely be able to benefit from this conversation.
Great. Well, I hope so. And, find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Alexis said, it's going to be in the description below. So go ahead, go to her LinkedIn, like she said, show her some love, connect, follow, like her comments
Like,
and posts
comment,
and things like
subscribe.
like, comment, and subscribe to her. And do that here. Like I'm going to say again, we have a podcast form as well. So go check that out. Techniche tips. Go ahead and check out the podcast form. But again, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. And like I always say, until next time, I hope to see you on the other side. Take care, family.